These are the two boxes that are going to act as drawers. In the first one, I have my cordless router and all its accessories. The second one has my Dowelling jig. These are highly processed wooden boxes. I'll use this project board to make a rack to hold my boxes. I'll start by cutting 3 pieces that are about 1/4 inch wider than the lid of my boxes. With everything stacked in place, I can measure for my side panels. Right now it's 11 inches, so my side panels are actually going to be 11 3/4. That way I have an extra 3/8 on top of each boxes so that they can be slid in easily. It's my first time trying out the jig, so it's going to probably take a few minutes to figure it out. Before I get started, I'll have to establish the depth of my holes. It's going to be with a stop right here. And because I don't have a lot of room in terms of thickness on each end of my dowel, I'm actually going to cut off about 1/8 off of them. That will give me a bit more room. And I'm setting up the depth at the bottom here. When I tighten the collar, I'm just going to make sure that the little screw is right over a flat surface on the drill bit. I'm going to do a quick test off camera to make sure this is the correct depth, and then I'll get back to you. My depth is set up, and I know I'm not going through my material. Now I'm going to have to set up the jig to make sure it's somewhat centered in this panel here, or on this edge. To do so, just untighten this part, and the stop can move. And I can use the material as a reference. Just tighten the knob. So if I drill like this, it's going to be fine. And then when I get to my other pieces that are on the edges, it's going to work as well. I'll start with these panel here. This will be my bottom panels, so the holes need to be on the edges, and this one has to be on the sides. And I have to mark my pieces, so I'm just going to line them up. And I'll actually use a guide to figure out the position, just to make sure I don't end up out of range. Yeah, so I'll line it on the side, and then I'll use the outside edge here to mark a line. That way, once I center it on the line, I'll be sure that my dowels are not too close to the edge. And this isn't flat perfectly, so I'm just going to make a small line. And then I'll extend it with a square. Now I'll just use my lines and my square. Now that my lines are extended, I can use them to center the guide or the jig. I can start drilling holes. I'm just going to repeat this process on my two side pieces, and I'll get back to you when I'm ready to drill the middle piece. Had to stop for a little bit. I just drilled the holes on the bottom, and then I decided it would be a good time to mark my pieces. Bottom right, bottom left, and so on. For the holes that have to be drilled on the edge, you line up the jig with your line like this, and then you can clamp it in place. The edge of the guide is 2 inches from the center of the dowels. That means I'll have to mark my center line and move it 2 inches, and I can use the edge as a reference and then drill my dowel holes. I'm just going to mark the line here. Do the same thing on the other side. And then I can use my marks to transfer it on this piece. Do the same thing on the other side. Now I can extend my lines. Just gotta make sure this is in the right setting. And it is. Gonna clean up my mess and get ready for assembly. I cut my dowels a little bit and I sanded the edges. There's something I must have done wrong because it's not flush. I have a feeling this is going to be the complicated part. While I was clamping this down, I had a few minutes to think about my sins. The reason it's not lining up here is because I used a jig from the inside and I should have used it from the outside to make sure that the holes line up. So if you remember, when I had it opened up, I marked my line on the inside. Well, if I would have done them from the opposite side, I wouldn't have run into this problem that appeared on the bottom, and the same thing on top. I used a bunch of clamps because my board was a little bit warped, so I needed to clamp that down to make sure it dries properly. Overall, it worked pretty good. Let's try to see if the box fits in. Oh yeah. Nice fit. I'm gonna be a little bit picky and I'm gonna run it through the router with a flush trim bit. That way I can get rid of this extra and I'll have a nice flush edge. This is how it's going to look from the front. I'm actually going to leave them hanging a little bit, that way I have somewhere to grab the boxes. On the back, I got two little scrap pieces of plywood that I'm going to attach right here. As I drill the holes, I'm going to attach it with these small screws.